A very good morning to all of you. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the working session 14, specifically selected topic, economic and social cultural rights as an answer to rising inequalities. My name is Marcin Walecki. I'm head of Democratization Department, and I have a pleasure to be a moderator of this session. Let me just start by reminding all of us that the speakers list is at the back of the head table. We have still the speakers list open. Right now, from what I'm hearing, we have about 20 speakers on the speaker list. We will, as always, close the speaker list once it reaches 50 participants. I would like to remind the speakers that they can only take the floor in the capacity in which they are registered, and only entities registered on the speakers list can be represented. As always, seats in HDIM plenary hall are designated as indicated on the signs placed around the table. All participants are kindly asked through the session to respect the seating arrangement. And I would like to also kindly remind participants to familiarize themselves with the rules for filming in the plenary hall as indicated in general information organization modalities. Before I briefly introduce our speaker, our main keynote speaker introducer, just wanted to remind all the participants of the session that we will continue today with discussing economic and social cultural rights. And looking into another agenda, I would like to stress that this working session will explore how an increased focus on economic, social, and cultural rights may provide answers to the challenges experienced by many participating states in the area of social inequalities and social justice. Global economic recession has been seen as a renewed attention to economic, social, and cultural rights, quite merited given the rise of politics of exclusion, often linked with intolerance that contains elements of economic, social, cultural exclusion, and can potentially lead to violent extremism. Those issues are also going to be discussed in the working session 15. When it comes to working session 14, the key issues, key questions which we would like to raise this morning are: how can governance systems become more inclusive to assist decision makers in better addressing inequalities? How can participating states' institutions work more effectively with civil society to address economic, social, cultural rights and rising inequalities? And what steps can the OSCE and UN frameworks take to support increased adherence to the conventions and increased protection of economic, social, cultural rights in practice? And it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Hanna Machińska. She's a leading Polish lawyer and civil activist, expert in human rights and harmonization of Poland to ecological law of EU. She is assistant professor at the Institute of Jurisprudence, Faculty of Law and Administration of Warsaw University. For many years, we had a great privilege to see Professor Machińska participating in HDIM in her capacity as a director of the Information Office of the Council of Europe, and later the director of the Council of Europe office in Warsaw. She also served as a deputy director of the Information and Documentation Center of the Council of Europe, Warsaw University Center for Europe. She, for many years, was an expert of Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a member of the reflection group participating in the debate about Europe established by the President of Poland in 2002. Professor Machińska, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present some reflections on social, economic, and cultural rights. Lack of social, economic, and cultural rights affects all of us. This is an obvious statement. The economic crisis and post-crisis period showed that these rights are fundamental rights for human beings, closely connected with human rights and democratic participation. These rights are not theoretical concept. We are talking about poverty, we are talking about social exclusion. Poverty means not only lack of material resources, but also social and cultural resources. Poverty is the worst form of violence, as Mahatma Gandhi said. Poverty creates a risk for the whole society, and the obvious result of this phenomenon is rise of populism. Economic crisis creates a temptation to impose a severe social restriction on many groups of the society. But at the same time, this difficult period shows the importance of the economic, social, and cultural rights. A basic question is how to fight against social exclusion and marginalization. What measures should be taken? How to create inclusive society with full access to economic, social, and cultural rights? Fighting against social exclusion needs an equal access for all to these rights and full implementation of anti-discrimination legal framework and an effective policy implemented at the national level. Social, economic, cultural rights are human rights protected in many instruments, many international instruments. The recognition of these rights we will find in Universal Declaration on Human Rights, like right to work, right to education, right to benefit of science and culture, and many other rights. But the main instrument is the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The Covenant protects a number of rights, among them the right to work, the right to join trade unions, the right to take collective labor action, the right to social security protection of the family, right to proper standard of living. Well, what should be stressed, it is the new step, very important step, taken at the level of United Nations. In 2008, UN General Assembly adopted the optional protocol to the International Covenant, which entered into force in 2013. The protocol gives a new power to the Committee of Economic and Social Cultural Rights to receive and consider necessary steps which should be taken by the state party. So, to receive and consider communication submitted by or on behalf of individual or groups of individual, the victims of violation. So the committee plays an important role in the implementation process as a guardian of the covenant. Well, there are many other international instruments. Well, we should also stress a very important document of the EC. We found the OEC standards in many documents. Let me mention the Helsinki 1975. The participating states decided to promote, but also to act in favor of effective realization of economic, cultural, and social rights. 8 years later, in Madrid, the participating states expressed the same attitude. The participating states agreed to develop policies and laws at the national level and decided to consider to accede to International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights and other international instruments. A special reference has been paid to the employment, housing, social security, health, education, and culture. Then Maastricht document 2003 shows a basic threats to security and stability, which are economic and social disparities, social exclusion, widespread poverty and unemployment. Well, there are many other documents which should be mentioned, and this document focuses on the right on culture, cultural heritage, right of national minorities, Roma and Sinti, in the context of cultural right. Well, I must say that nowadays Cultural rights plays an important role in the work of deepening inequalities. Culture is a way of communication in the diverse society. Multicultural world is a place where many negative phenomena arise, such as marginalization of many social groups, discrimination in the economic, social, and educational area. Culture is the sphere of life which creates a number of dilemmas. Culture should be perceived as a set of material, intellectual, emotional features characterizing a society or a special group. But we have to notice many these negative phenomena in multicultural world, like progressive discrimination, intolerance, xenophobia. Very often, cultural rights occur in a political context. Let me mention a problem of religious beliefs in the workplace, religious symbol, freedom of artistic expression. How to protect cultural rights in so diverse society, how to combine diversity and freedom in democratic state. These issues are deeply rooted in many international standards. Again, let me make a reference to OSCE document adopted in Krakow in 1991 on the issue of accessibility to cultural heritage, the links between cultural life and economic situation of the society. In these documents, this issue was very important and was stressed many times. Well, but economic crisis, especially economic crisis in Europe, depriving many people of basic guarantees of their rights, show that there is an urgent need to enhance social protection. So it is expected that at least at the European level, two fundamental treaties will play a very important role. These treaties are, of course, the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Social Charter. The fundamental pillar of the social rights are the European Social Charter and the revised European Social Charter, which is the social constitution of Europe. The Charter, adopted in 1961 and entered into force in 1965, regulates and secures basic rights regarding health, education, employment, legal, economic, and social protection. In 1999, the revised charter entered into force, introducing the new rights: right to protection against poverty, social exclusion, right to housing, right to protection in case of termination of employment, right to protection against sexual harassment, guarantee for equal opportunities. The last protocol, which I would like to underline, introducing a system of collective complaints, came into force in 1998. There is no individual complaint system in the Charter, like if you compare with the European Convention on Human Rights. But this protocol gives a power to many organizations, including international non-governmental organizations, to lodge a complaint within the Committee of Social Rights. The committee has a competence to ensure that the member states comply with the Charter rights. The conclusion of the committee is based on the national reports, and the committee adopts also the decision based on the procedure of collective complaints. Let me present some statistical data. In 2016, the committee found 166 violations and adopted 513 conclusions concerning the right to work, to vocational training, the right to equal opportunities, protection against discrimination due to disability, and sexual orientation. Talking about economic and social cultural rights, we should notice many problems at the European level, but also many problems concerning implementation process at the national level. So it is quite important to underline the role of the European Social Charter and, of course, the role of the European Committee on Social Rights. Let me give you some examples. For instance, the European Committee of Social Rights decided that the violation case of concerning Roma and travelers, that violation of these rights have been found on the grounds of failure of the authorities to take appropriate measures to address the exclusion, marginalization, and environmental hazards. So there are many other very important statements and, let's say, a very fundamental statement, which should be a very important indication for the member states. For instance, a violation of Roma rights have been found on the grounds of insufficient legal protection of their families, discriminatory access in practice to social services, and many others. So, Secretary General of the Council of Europe, in his last report on the state of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, underlined the importance to build the inclusive society based on equal rights, tolerance, social rights for all, integration of migrants, education, and culture for democracy. Many legal and not binding instruments support this task. First of all, strategies and conventions. Strategies like strategy on the right of person with disability, the European Cohesion Platform, and of course, concerning convention, the European Convention on Human Rights, the Istanbul Convention, Protocol 12 to the European Convention on Human Rights, Framework Convention on the protection of national minorities, Social Charter, Revised Social Charter, and so on. But there is a very serious and many obstacles to reach a coherent European system of social protection. First of all, the difference in legal protection of social rights at the EU level vis-à-vis the Council of Europe system, and the difference between the standards of legal protection at the national level. That is why the Secretary General indicated that ratification of the revised charter, full implementation of the decisions and conclusions of the Committee of Social Rights, ensuring greater synergy between the Council of Europe and EU law is very important challenge for the member states. We should stress a very also important initiative of the European Commission for a European pillar on social rights. The Secretary General initiated so-called Turin process. The main purpose is to reinforce the system of social charter, to coordinate these two systems, the EU and the Council of Europe, and to improve the implementation of social rights. Let me add one more reflection, because we are talking about social economic rights, but what's about cultural rights? Cultural rights are very often treated as neglected rights, but there is a strong link between the democracy and participation in cultural life. Enjoyment of cultural life is an important factor of the integration process. Let me make once more a reference to this report on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which says that where cultural participation is high, tolerance is high. Social inclusion means also culture inclusion. The widening gulf which exists in Europe between the immigrant community and the Europeans is a phenomenon that proves that the low efficiency of the instruments used in field of economic, social, asylum, cultural sphere is still is existing. Culture modifies public awareness. Culture should be seen in the context of human rights. Cultural rights means the right to education, artistic expression, cultural identity, protection of cultural heritage, linguistic rights, but also right to seek historical truth. These rights are covered by European Convention on Human Rights and other international instruments. Of course, European context is very important, context of economic, social and cultural rights, but this context should be seen in more global dimension, which is 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This agenda offers a unique opportunity to promote development approach which improve the respect for human rights, as the Commissioner on Human Rights said. There is a close link between the international, regional organization standards and the global approach represented by the UN. But the full implementation of all international standards preventing social, economic, cultural exclusion is a responsibility of the participating states. Let me quote the statement of the rapporteur of the Parliamentary Assembly rapporteur on social. There is a very important report on social exclusion. He said that the state should contribute to breaking cycles of disadvantages by helping the very poorest, improving access to education and training, and guaranteeing a minimum family income. There should be targeted measure for groups in need of special protection, such as migrants, ethnic minorities, people with disabilities. Finally, there should be serious efforts to bring marginalized people into democratic mainstream by setting up participatory mechanisms and bodies at local level, promoting easy to understand communication and ensuring basic social and political rights. I should also add not only social and political rights, but also cultural rights. Thank you very much.
Professor Machinska, thank you very much indeed for your thorough remarks. Thank you once again for reminding us that economic, social, cultural rights represent critical human dimension elements in the realization of a comprehensive concept of security. Thank you for reminding us about existing instruments, also stressing the importance of cultural rights and bringing the discussion about SDG agenda to this forum. I now would like to once again remind that we have an open list for speakers. I'm very happy to give the floor to a first speaker on our list, Happy Humans International, followed by UK on behalf of the European Union. I've consulted my colleagues and we can now allocate 5 minutes to speakers. So the floor will go now to Happy Humans International.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thanks to Ossi for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. I'm Michela Micarelli, a London-based psychotherapist, and I'm the founder and president of Happy Humans International, a non-profit organization determined to positively transform the lives of orphans, women, elderly, sick, and families in need of Kyrgyzstan, providing them material and psychological resources. Today, I'd like to address the representative of the Kyrgyz government on 3 items: education, poverty in rural areas, and psychological support to the needy. With regard to education, we'd like to recommend the Kyrgyz government to proceed with the efforts in this field to improve the access to education, namely guaranteeing equal access to all levels of education. Moreover, we encourage the authorities to improve the distribution of resources between the urban and rural areas in a more equitable way, as well as to strengthen the connection between the world of education and the world of work by guaranteeing an educational system strongly linked to the needs of the labor market. We also recommend to continue improve the quality of education, an education that is aimed at the full development of human personality. Coming to poverty in rural areas, this is significant and contributes to the very high emigration rates in Kyrgyzstan. Many people, especially young men, they leave Kyrgyzstan to look for jobs abroad, especially in Russia and Kazakhstan. In order to improve the life quality levels of people living in rural areas of Kyrgyzstan and alleviate poverty, we would like to ask the Kyrgyz government to strengthen the efforts to develop income-generating activities and to improve rural infrastructures. And such action will give the high number of female farmers and women-headed households determined by the considerable labor migration by men great opportunities to be involved in the income-generating activities and in general in the development process of rural areas. With regard to the last item, psychological support to the needy, with the widespread poverty levels, depression and anxiety are usually very common among population. And in order to tackle such issues, we would like to recommend the Kyrgyz government to develop, if possible, special programs to give psychological support to the unemployed and the students. And with regard to this later category, my personal work experience in Kyrgyzstan showed that anxiety levels are very high among university students and having a remarkable impact on both social and study areas of their lives. From our side, we as humans want to give our full availability to the Kyrgyz government for the development of such psychological support programs, and we'll keep on with our efforts to realize happiness among the human beings living in Kyrgyzstan. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. I would like to give the floor now to UK on behalf of the European Union, followed by Equal Rights Trust.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you also to the introducer for her remarks and introduction to the subject. I'm honoured to be able to speak on behalf of the EU and its member states, and also on behalf of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Liechtenstein, Ukraine, Moldova, Armenia, Georgia, Andorra and San Marino. The EU attaches the same importance to economic, social and cultural rights as we do to civil and political rights. They are interdependent. Economic, social and cultural rights must be respected, protected and realised on an equal footing with civil and political rights. We promote and protect them worldwide, both here and in other multilateral fora, and raise specific issues during policy dialogues and work with civil society organisations. Engagement for the protection of economic, social and cultural rights has been reinforced in the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights Strategy, which specifically refers to the promotion of economic, social and cultural rights. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, ratified by 54 of the 57 participating states, including all EU member states, covers a broad range of issues. The right to work, freely chosen and in favourable conditions, and with the right to form trade unions, family life and marriage, including the right to choose when and who to marry, housing, food and the right to live free from hunger, physical and mental health, the right to education, the right to take part in cultural life and to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress, Each one of these, and its links to the OSCE's comprehensive concept of security, could have been a topic for discussion in itself. The OSCE has a number of commitments covering economic, social and cultural rights, dating from the Helsinki Final Act, and the introducer acknowledged quite a few of those in your speech. But given the links between economic, social and cultural rights and civil and political rights, the commitments are much broader than can be listed here. For example, the right to form trade unions is protected by freedom of association. The right to safe and healthy working conditions are protected by the right to be free from torture or degrading or inhumane treatment. Economic, social and cultural rights are embedded in the work of the OSCE. The right to an education is a central part of the work of the High Commissioner on National Minorities and the contact point for Roma and Sinti issues. A lack of access to education and the ability to stay in school affects girls in particular. They must have the power to make their own choices about their health, their relationships, whether or not to have children and how many, the freedom to live without violence and the opportunity to become leaders in their societies and fulfill their potential through a quality education and a worthwhile career. The right to freely choose your work is a fundamental part of the Office of the Special Representative in her work to combat trafficking in human beings, as is the right to an adequate standing of living and to be free from hunger. Every part of the OSCE and every participating state's delegation has a responsibility to ensure gender equality, both in terms of remuneration and fair wages, but also equal opportunity to be promoted. So while we hear calls for us to devote more time to economic, social and cultural rights, we believe that our discussions of human rights and fundamental freedoms frequently covers the issues described as economic, social and cultural rights. We also believe that this is not just the responsibility of those of us here working on the human dimension. Human rights apply equally in the security and economic and environmental dimensions of the OSCE. As we discuss those issues, we urge participating states and the OSCE to recognise the cross-dimensional aspects of human rights. In conclusion, we reiterate that human rights are interdependent, interrelated and indivisible. We cannot separate civil and political rights from economic, social and cultural rights. If our goal is to address inequality, we need to consider human rights in the whole. The OSCE, with its comprehensive concept of security, is uniquely placed to respond. We have one recommendation, which is that all participating states recognise their responsibility to actively promote economic, social and cultural rights to their citizens without discrimination towards any group and to ensure effective monitoring of those rights, including appropriate forms of redress. A slightly fuller version of this statement with the final list of aligned states will be circulated to all participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, UK. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of a cross-dimensional approach and interdependence of those rights. I would like to give a floor now to Equal Rights Trust, followed by the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Equal Rights Trust is an international organisation existing to combat all forms of discrimination and to promote equality as a fundamental human right and basic principle of social justice. Over the course of the last 10 years, we have engaged in supporting civil society to combat discrimination in 17 of the Organisation of Security and Cooperation in Europe's member states. We welcome the inclusion today of this topic on the HDIM agenda. And in our view, we want to stress the fact that the links between inequality and economic and social rights are mutual. Just as improving enjoyment of these economic, social and cultural rights will reduce social inequalities, so inequality, more specifically discrimination, can result in denial or limitation of these rights. As such, I'd like to focus on the role of discrimination in the denial or limitation of economic and social rights, and therefore on the role of comprehensive anti-discrimination law in increasing the enjoyment of these rights. Our work in various OSCE states over the last 10 years has found consistent evidence that discrimination arising on various grounds is a significant factor in the limitation of economic and social rights. As stressed by the UK delegation just now, horizontal and vertical gender segregation in the labour market, a product of both direct and indirect discrimination, significantly impacts women's enjoyment of the right to work. Moreover, in a number of OSCE countries such as Azerbaijan, discriminatory laws which limit women's rights to work in certain areas, ostensibly to protect them from hazardous environments, directly discriminate and limit the enjoyment of the right to work. Racial and ethnic discrimination remains a barrier to the enjoyment of many economic and social rights throughout the OSCE region. In both Ukraine and Moldova, for example, we found consistent evidence that discrimination and harassment against Roma persons limits their enjoyment of the rights to the highest attainable standard of health. Similarly, in both these countries, we found evidence that the states had failed to address the exclusion of children with disabilities from the mainstream school system, limiting their right to education. And in all of the states in which we have worked, a continued failure to make reasonable accommodation limits the enjoyment of the rights to work for persons with disabilities. In Russia, and indeed to a greater or lesser extent in the other OSCE states where we have worked, we found evidence that lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender persons had experienced direct discrimination in employment as a result of prejudice and stigma against them. In Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, we found evidence of religious discrimination against both men and women who demonstrate their Islamic faith through their attire and appearance, affecting their rights in employment. And in Belarus, we found evidence of direct discrimination on the basis of political opinion, affecting those in opposition to, or perceived to be in opposition to, the government, who face dismissal from their employment in public bodies and exclusion from higher education institutions. While many of these patterns of discrimination persist to a greater or lesser extent throughout the OSCE region, there is a striking difference in the legal framework on discrimination and inequality between member states. While in an increasing number of OSCE participating countries there is comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation, and there are other states, such as Armenia, which are making welcome steps in this regard, many states do not have such legislation. Article 26 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights imposes a clear obligation to enact laws which prohibit discrimination in law, an obligation which OSCE states reiterated at the Copenhagen HDIM conference. Article 26 is, of course, complemented by Article 2.1 of the same covenant and Article 2.2 of the ICESCR, which creates an obligation to ensure non-discrimination in respect of all economic, social and cultural rights. In 2008, the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights stated clearly that Article 2.2 necessitates the adoption of specific and comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation to achieve the protection from discrimination in the enjoyment of economic and social rights. There is thus a clear legal obligation on all OSCE states to enact specific and comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation, and a clear need to do so if economic and social rights are to be realised. The Declaration of Principles on Equality, developed by the Equal Rights Trust with the assistance of more than 140 experts from more than 40 different countries, and subsequently endorsed by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, provides states with a detailed set of principles to inform the adoption of such legislation. It provides that anti-discrimination laws must be both specific and genuinely comprehensive, providing protection from discrimination on all grounds recognised at international law, in all areas of life regulated by law, and from all forms of discrimination, direct, indirect, harassment, and failure to make reasonable accommodation. Such laws must make provision for positive action measures and provide procedural mechanisms to ensure that victims can vindicate their claims. I urge all OSCE member states that have yet to do so to adopt comprehensive and specific anti-discrimination legislation to ensure the full enjoyment of economic and social rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I would like to kindly encourage all the speakers to submit their statements to the distribution center so we could provide them to all the participants. Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to the Russian Federation, followed by the delegation of USA.
Thank you, moderator, dear colleagues. My name is Ksenia Penchenka, and I represent the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation. To begin with, I would like to note that in the OSCE we are still seeing an unequal approach to the consideration of civil and political rights on the one hand and economic, social and cultural rights on the other. Unfortunately, in international fora, much more attention is being paid to the former than to the latter. In the latter sphere, fewer resolutions and decisions are taken, fewer special procedures are being instituted. We note that multilateral human rights defense structures, as in the past, are finding it difficult to move away from a double standards and politicization to ensure in practice the indivisibility and equality of all human rights. And this is fully characteristic of the consideration of this sphere within the framework of the OSCE. In the Vienna document of 1989, the participating states recognized that contributing to the development of economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as civil and political rights, is of extremely great importance for human dignity and for the achievement of the legitimate aspirations of every individual. In Article 14, we agreed that we would pay particular attention to problems in the fields of employment, housing, social security, healthcare, education, and culture, and also contribute to constant progress in the achievement of all rights and freedoms in our states, equally in the development of relations amongst ourselves and with other states, in order that every individual be able fully to enjoy her or his economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as her or his civil and political rights. Now, the commitment to respect and protect economic, social, and cultural rights is cast in stone in many OSCE documents, starting with the Helsinki Final Act. And nevertheless, we regularly hear from our Western OSCE partners about some alleged insufficiency of commitments in this sphere. As a result, the given thematic area is regularly swept under the carpet by our colleagues in the course of work on OSCE Council documents, as if this were something that is sort of out of date and unnecessary. And this is being done in order to concentrate work exclusively on civil and political rights, which are used, taken advantage of by the USA, Canada, and the EU for their ad hoc purposes. Our colleagues regularly deplore the fact that there haven't been a renewal of commitments on freedom of expression or freedom of association and meeting. And when did we last really take a hard look at a substantive document on economic, social, and cultural rights in the light of new challenges and challenges? Now, we note that there is a readiness of the future Italian chairmanship and office of the OSCE to pay equal attention to all categories of rights, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural. Russia intends to continue to actively work on the strengthening and progress of the principle of equality of all categories of human rights. In their indivisibility, we must continue our joint work on improving the situation of individuals in the entire OSCE region and continue to work on meeting contemporary challenges and threats in this sphere. Thank you.
From Ossetia accuses.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank our introducer for a very good presentation. Discrimination in the provision of basic services such as housing, education, and safe drinking water contributes to inequality. The United States fights such discrimination with a number of federal laws and enforcement mechanisms. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in rental, sales, or home lending transactions based on a person's national origin, race, color, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. The Act also prohibits the refusal to make reasonable accommodations for a person with disability. The Department of Housing and Urban Development's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity has a mission of eliminating housing discrimination, promoting economic opportunity, and achieving diverse, inclusive communities. By leading the nation in the enforcement, administration, development, and public understanding of federal fair housing laws and policies, HUD's enforcement actions reflect our nation's promise of fair housing and equal access to credit for every qualified individual, regardless of their national origin or whether they have children. The Department of Education enforces several federal civil rights laws. Discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin is prohibited by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Sex discrimination is prohibited by Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. Discrimination on the basis of disability is prohibited by Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and age discrimination is prohibited by the Age Discrimination Act of 1975. These civil rights statutes extend to all state education and agencies, school systems, rehabilitation agencies, libraries, and museums that receive U.S. Department of Education funds. The Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights serves student populations facing discrimination and the advocates and institutions promoting systemic solutions to civil rights problems. An important responsibility is resolving complaints of discrimination. Agency-initiated cases, typically called compliance reviews, permit OCR to target resources on compliance problems that appear particularly acute. OCR also provides technical assistance to help institutions achieve compliance with civil rights laws. The Environmental Protection Agency has a similar office responsible for enforcing civil rights laws, which prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin, including on the basis of limited English proficiency, sex, disability, and age by applicants for and recipients of federal financial assistance from EPA. So in each of these cases, persons regardless of race, color, national origin, age, sex, or disability are entitled to receive benefits and participate in programs and activities without discrimination. So thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Now I would like to give the floor to National Forum Ossetia Accuses, followed by People's Assembly of Kyrgyzstan.
Спасибо большое, господин.
Thank you very much indeed, moderator, and good morning, everybody. Looking at the issue we are discussing today, I'd like to draw your attention to the recommendations of the Georgian delegation with regard to the infringement of Georgian rights in the Republic of South Ossetia. The issues related to education and limited access to healthcare. All citizens of the Republic of South Ossetia have equal rights and freedoms, whatever their national or religious background. They have access to the assistance of the Republic and access to healthcare, the right to education. In one Republic of South Ossetia, there are 6 Georgian schools where children get an education in their mother tongue. In Georgia, all of the Ossetian schools have been closed. So when it comes to talking about social adaptation of social minorities and education in the language of the minority, well, that is one of the key ways of integrating an ethnic minority. And we need to recognize that national minorities should not be separated from their culture, as it's one of the key factors in social adaptation. South Ossetia ensures that there are cultural events at Georgian schools where there are national dances and music, songs. So Georgia always seems to politicize these questions. We talk about refugees of national minorities. Georgia talks about national territory's integrity. And we need to note that the South Ossetian Republic is not linked economically or politically with Georgia. It's not a part of Georgia, and the politicization of its internal issues will never lead to a solution of the problem. So we would ask the Georgians and the United States to be constructive in discussion of such humanitarian issues. Thank you.
Spasiba. I would like to give the floor now to People's Assembly of Kyrgyzstan, followed by delegation of Poland.
Спасибо.
Thank you. Dear friends, dear colleagues, according to most recent data, the Kyrgyz Republic has about 100 ethnic national minorities, with a view to ensuring peace, stability, and peaceful coexistence of different faiths and ethnic minorities. In 1994, we were one of the first post-Soviet states to set up a People's Assembly. At the present time, this assembly includes representatives from more than 30 national minorities of the Kyrgyz Republic. The People's Assembly of Kyrgyzstan contributes actively to amendments of the Constitution, which set out the main rights and duties of citizens. There are provisions concerning the preservation of cultures, traditions, and languages of the national minorities. In 2013, by a decree of the President of Kyrgyzstan, a conceptual strategy for strengthening interethnic and interfaith agreement was promulgated, and it set out the state policy in the sphere of religious organizations. Now, within this conceptual strategy, the main orientation was to strengthen peace and peaceful coexistence among interfaith and among different faiths and different ethnic minorities, with a view also to combat radicalism and extremism within the country. In order to strengthen peace among ethnic groups and religions, we have adopted the following social and ethical principles: justice, non-violence, equality and tolerance, freedom and responsibility, commonality of welfare, a single educational system. And these principles also make it possible to strengthen other rights, and especially cultural rights. The People's Assembly of Kyrgyzstan works hand in hand with the government, with local authorities, and also with other civil society organizations, with a view to qualitatively improving the cultural level of the young generation, to ensure religious education for all, and to make sure that the social integration of all individuals within the society is possible. This allows us to reduce the critical mass of root causes of extremism, terrorism, and radicalism within our society. Thank you for your attention.
By Sandy Jan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First, I would like to thank Professor Machińska for her comprehensive introduction. Poland aligns itself with the statement delivered by the EU. In my national capacity, I would like to refer particularly to one recommendation concerning implementation of the EU guiding principles on business and human rights. I would like to share with you the information of the Polish practices in this regard. In May 2017, the Polish Council of Ministers adopted National Action Plan for the implementation of the EU guiding principles on business and human rights for 2017-2020. To this end, there were conducted public consultations with a wide range of stakeholders, primarily with employers' organizations, trade unions, and non-governmental organizations. The main goal was to facilitate evaluation of the issue from different perspectives and to collect specific recommendations for the National Action Plan that was created on the basis of 3 pillars included in the EU guiding principles: the state duty to protect human rights, the corporate responsibility to protect human rights, and access to remedies. Through the implementation of the EU guiding principles, the National Action Plan primarily aims to enhance the protection of human rights on individuals and to enable them to seek justice when the rights are violated by business. The MFA has assumed the role of coordinator of the process of developing the National Action Plan, and we cooperated in this area with governmental institutions, industry, and non-governmental organizations. The issue of ensuring the observance of human rights in business is the shared responsibility of state, including the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, as well as business cycles and civil society. As regards implementation, we plan in particular various actions in the field of education and public information, addressed both to companies and consumers. In October 2017, we will organize, together with the Ministry of Economic Development and the Polish Institute for the Human Rights and Business, a conference aiming at spreading information of the EU guiding principles and action plan under the Polish National Action Plan. Monitoring of the implementation of this document will be carried out through preparation of timetables of actions by individual ministries responsible for its implementation, preparation of the interim report and a list of good practices by the end of 2018, and preparation of the final report by the end of 2020. Poland also encouraged all OSCE participating states which haven't it done yet to prepare their own national action plans for the implementation of the EU guiding principles on business and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Polish delegation, for sharing with us those good practices. Now I would like to give a floor to Sandijan, followed by delegation of Kyrgyzstan.
Господин
Moderator, colleagues, I'd like to express our gratitude for the opportunity to speak here at this important event. I think it's important here to talk about the failure to comply in Georgia with the rights of Ossetians in the areas where many of them live. We have a political situation in the educational sphere where there is no opportunity to learn in Ossetian language. They've been deprived of their opportunity to learn in their own mother tongue. There's no media in Ossetian, and we're not allowed to have cultural events in the Ossetian language. This is a clear violation of human rights and freedom. At the same time, in South Ossetia, there are 6 Georgian schools which give classes in Georgian. There are teachers in these schools coming from Georgia, and within the context of South Ossetian education system, there are concerts, competitions and other cultural events which are carried out. And this in the context where the ratio of ethnic Georgians to Ossetians is 1 to 5. So we have to recognize that this is taking place in the context where the population of ethnic Ossetians in Georgia has dropped from 126,000 in 1991 to 20,000 today, and this trend is continuing. There was a situation in Kob recently where there was a cemetery which was destroyed for the building of a restaurant and leisure center. The skulls from the graves were put in the box and were available to view, which is in the best. It was a tradition almost of cannibalism. So it's important that we recognize what is happening and that we respect humanitarian views. Thank you.
Institute for Geostrategy.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, as has previously been said, at the present time in Kyrgyzstan, we have more than 100 ethnic minorities. The Kyrgyzs are the largest, 73%, Uzbeks 14%, and Russians about 6%. Now, the representatives of these different groups live in mixed groups or in isolation from one another. Now, with a view to ensuring equality of rights and equalizing the opportunities for the various social groups, there are measures that allow for special measures to be introduced when the percentage goes beyond a certain threshold. There is a prohibition of any discrimination on the basis of ethnic origin or gender or religion. It is possible for all to enjoy education on a general level free of charge, and this can be done in one's own language or in other languages. Healthcare is available to all. There are measures that provide for access even to private healthcare when public healthcare is not sufficient or not available. And there are schools with the Russian language, the Tajik language, the Uzbek language, and the Kyrgyz language as the national language was unfortunately not taught at all in some of these schools. But now there is multilingual education, and teachers and parents from ethnic minorities are encouraged to learn the Kyrgyz language as well. Now, teaching in the Russian language is available in 216 schools and in Uzbek in 43 schools. Now, there is a constitutional guarantee of bilingualism, And so the number of schools with 2 and more languages of instruction is increasing. There were 55 schools before 2016, and since then 25 more schools have been opened, and this is a very good basis for increasing the network of schools that apply this multilingual education system. And this is a way for making it possible for all to preserve their own cultures and traditions. We have a music and drama theater that works in various languages as well. There are many publications available not just in the Kyrgyz language, but in many others as well. This is part and parcel of our overall strategy to solidify the unity of the nation and the society. Special programs of small grants have been funded in order to make it possible for representatives of various ethnic minorities to preserve their cultures. We will continue to work on ensuring the cultural rights of the peoples as well as their economic and social rights. Thank you.
Anti-Discrimination Center Memorial.
Mr. Moderator, participants of these meetings, thank you for your opportunity to make a speech. My name is Nariman Ustaev, and I am a Director General of Gasprinsky Institute for Geostrategy, based in Kyiv, Ukraine. I would like to speak about economic rights of the Crimean Tatar people, which have to be envisaged in amendments to the Constitution of Ukraine concerning Crimea, on which we are currently working as experts. The long years of genocide of the Crimean Tatar people by Soviet regime had led to the loss of the right of the indigenous people of the Crimea on their lands, territories and resources. It is referred to the following: violation of traditional patterns of possession and usage of indigenous people of their land, change of the settlement map of the Crimean Tatar people, which led to the loss of traditional lands, the deterioration of the Crimean land, the quantity and quality of natural resources, unfair distribution of lands and resources, lack of effective mechanisms for resolving land conflicts, inefficiency of land registers and difficulties encountered during the registration of ownership of land. Modern international law and existing international practice provide a number of alternatives to the political and economic self-determination of indigenous people, including the provision of various forms of autonomy, involvement in the management of the state, recognizing the rights of indigenous people on lands, territories, and resources. It is necessary to clearly indicate in Ukrainian legislation and effective and transparent mechanisms for restoring and ensuring the practical realization of the collective ownership of the Crimean Tatar people to their lands and resources. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. I would like to give a floor now to Anti-Discrimination Center Memorial, followed by Human Rights Movement, Bizdino, Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I represent Anti-Discrimination Center Memorial, organization working in many countries in the Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Social, economic, and cultural rights mean, of course, non-discrimination in employment, education, and answering basic needs of different people. Discrimination or not equal rights to work are prohibited in general, for example, by the International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights and by constitutions of most of OSCE region countries. However, some labor codes still prohibit jobs for women. In at least 10 countries exist lists of jobs forbidden for women. These are Azerbaijan, Belarus, Moldova, Russia, Ukraine, and 5 Central Asian countries: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Our organization, ADC Memorial, runs a campaign, All Jobs for All Women, insisting on the need to abolish these bans as discriminative. Both CWN and the Committee on Social, Economic and Cultural Rights many times pointed out the problem of inequality of women and men in job access. UN experts saw direct discrimination forbidding some jobs to women, while nothing is forbidden for men, for example, in the individual decision on the complaint of Svetlana Medvedev against Russia. Today, at lunchtime, ADC Memorial is hosting a side event called Right to Work Has No Gender. We'll have expert on gender discrimination, participation of the member of Verkhovna Rada, Parliament of Ukraine, who fights bans for work in her country. And we'll have a female truck driver, a professional who works in the field of forbidden professions and tries to protect her rights. One of the issues that we work on and that will also be presented on the event is the legal case, I will show a video, opposing discrimination in courts. It's an important case of trying to prove discrimination for a female sailor who was refused a job because it is forbidden for women. Just a few days ago, we had finally the court decision that recognized discrimination in this case. And this is the first important step to opposing the ban, recognition. However, we need a real change, and the change has to be in the legislation to guarantee the right for women for all jobs they want, and not just in a declarative way, but in the real way to access them. Legislative change has to follow the recognition, not only in Russia, but in all the countries that still keep the old Soviet discriminative norm in their lands, and take overprotective measures to women, giving them no right to decide whether they want the job or not, whether they have other understanding of their role in life than the state. Actually, the reason why women are usually refused jobs, why this so-called lists of harmful and dangerous for women protection exist, the reasoning is reproductive health of women, which obviously puts women in a position of somebody who have reproductive obligations, unlike men. This reasoning is also discriminative in itself, because women in our times decide themselves whether they want to be professionals or mothers, or they have the chance to combine both. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Memorial, for those important remarks. All the countries which you listed indeed ratified CEDAW, and CEDAW on a number of occasions criticize those provisions. So I think this is a very important intervention, and I would like to encourage you to submit it to the distribution center. Thank you very much indeed, and I would like to give a floor now to Human Rights Movement Birdino, Kyrgyzstan, followed by the World Russian People's Council.
Добрый день.
Good morning, participants. The Human Rights Movement Bizdino Kyrgyzstan would like to draw your attention to the situation in workers and working migrants' right to economic, social and cultural rights, particularly the situation with women and children. In the first decade of this century, the migration to the country increased. 50,000 people each country leave the country, and according to the migration there's around 700,000 people are outside the country in host countries in order to get work. In general, host countries are Kazakhstan and Russia. From the moment when Kyrgyzstan enjoyed the local economic union, the processes were simplified, and access of children rather, to education and healthcare improved. But in order to get this possibility, our migrants need to sign a contract with their employers. Now, it's difficult to sign such an official contract for all of the working migrants. That's due partly to the employers in the receiving country, partly because of the position that our migrants occupy in the society where they are living. Those that don't have official employment contracts are extremely vulnerable because they can't get social assistance, healthcare, and furthermore, the policy in Kyrgyzstan and the other countries that I've mentioned should be based on rights, such as gender rights. But at the moment, around 40% of Kyrgyz migrants in the Russian Federation are women. And you have a similar makeup from Tajikistan, but less, up to 20%. So the potential violation of women's and children's rights is particularly high because they are vulnerable. Firstly, because they are a traditionally vulnerable population of women and children. Secondly, because they're migrants, so they face additional risk of discrimination, psychological, physical. They face possibility of violence and abuse, and labor and sexual exploitation. They can be victims of inadequate working and living conditions, and they can be denied access to medical assistance. And that includes reproductive health, and they also have a lack of access to the justice system. The law enforcement agencies and non-governmental organizations also have a role to play in this. So it's a very complicated situation, especially in Russia, where there is a xenophobic atmosphere. In Kyrgyzstan 2015, in the Committee on Social and Economic Cultural Rights, or rather, there was a report from the Committee of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights from the Committee of the UN. Not all the recommendations have been implemented. There are particularly important recommendations relating to the protection of the rights of migrant workers from Kyrgyzstan. We believe it's necessary to implement this. It's also necessary to ratify Convention 143 and its additional provisions of the ILO, as well as other conventions on working conditions, on domestic workers. It's necessary to ratify the optional protocol of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And it's also necessary for the state to clearly look at all of the rights that migrant workers have in accordance with the commitments they've taken upon themselves in relations with the OSCE, for example, and the EU. It's necessary to clearly identify the necessary development of trade unions as well for migrant workers. Thank you very much indeed.
The floor to World Russian People's Council, followed by International Byzantine Institute. And I would like to remind all the participants the speakers list is still open, so if you would like to sign up for the speaker list, please don't hesitate to do so.
Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, I would like to thank the OSCE and the Polish authorities for receiving us here at this very important conference on fundamental issues of human rights. Now, the World Russian People's Council was constituted some 25 years ago, and for 10 years now it's had a consultative status at the United Nations organization. And now, today, I would like to draw your attention to some problems associated with cultural identification or cultural identity. In the report of our introducer, the right to a cultural identity is one of the most basic rights in that basket of rights about which we are talking today. And there are many states represented here today that are actively promoting this concept of protection of cultures and languages, not only within the borders of one's own country, but also abroad among compatriots through special programs, but throughout the world also vis-à-vis other individuals. But there is sometimes discrimination practiced vis-à-vis individuals who identify themselves as having Russian origins in linguistic or cultural terms, depending on the country in which they live. Now, the main example of such discrimination is, of course, the situation in Ukraine, where individuals who identify themselves as being of Russian origin are subject to pressure and even to persecution, threats to their lives, threats to their health, simply because they publicly announce and proclaim their identification with the Russian-speaking and Russian cultural world. Now, this, I think, is absolutely unacceptable and inconsistent with OSCE commitments. One of the examples of this phenomenon is, of course, the new law on education, which is shortly going to be enacted in Ukraine and which will severely limit the possibility for citizens to obtain education in their own mother tongue if that mother tongue is not Ukrainian. So there will be inequality of opportunities, not just for people of Russian ethnic origin in Ukraine, but also the people from other linguistic cultural spheres other than Russian and Ukrainian. And this concept of the cultural unicity or identity of individuals should not be perceived as something negative. This can be a good basis for the intercultural dialogue, for a genuine dialogue among all citizens of a given nation. It can be enriching. And I think that on this basis, one can find new ways of resolving the conflictual problems that we often discuss in these fora, sometimes in a very sort of unilateral way on both sides. Thank you for your attention.
Uzbekistan. Пожалуйста, включите микрофон.
Уважаемый господин
Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank the organisers for the possibility to speak here at Warsaw on the OSCE meeting for the consideration of aspects relating to the human dimension. I represent the International Byzantine Institute, which is headquartered in Athens, the cradle of European civilization. Looking at one of the areas of our work is developing a civilized or a worldview of civilization, understanding the roots of human development and providing an appropriate answer to the challenges faced by humans today. The question of ensuring rights for harmonious development of humankind is pressing. We recognize that there are contradictions on a number of questions and the challenges we face. We see trends of dehumanization where we lose sight of the human dimension. One example is technology, which questions our privacy. The possibility of technological interference in the very biological nature of humans. If you look at gene technology, reproductive technology, striking the balance between protecting the nature, protecting nature and protecting humans. All of these require discussion. And if we are to develop harmoniously, we need to ensure that humans are protected, and that requires the unification of religious, society, traditions, and human rights defenders. So we could call this a kind of eco-humanism. We have a side event on this, and we hope that we can see this issue further developed within the framework of the OSCE in the future.
Delegation of Uzbekistan, followed by delegation of Armenia.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, Uzbekistan is subject to international law, fulfills its international commitments under the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which it ratified in 1985. All of the human rights set out in international pacts are enshrined in our constitution. And have been reflected in more than 400 laws enacted over the years of our independence. The protection of human rights is one of the highest priority of our dramatic reforms. On 7 February of this year, the President confirmed a strategy of action on the reforms to be implemented through to 2020. And the main principle is that the people are not at the service of the state, but the state at the service of the people. And that is one of the main thrusts of our overall policy. Now, one of the main orientations is to develop the social sphere, to increase employment, the real incomes of citizens, ensure social security and health care, to promote political action by women, make sure that housing is accessible to all, develop inexpensive and effective means of public transport, develop sport, culture, literature, art, and science, especially for young people. 2017 has been identified a year of dialogue with the nation in the interests of the people. And a new form or a new methodology of work is being introduced, the main mechanism being to consult the people in order to protect their interests by knowing them better. There is a real feedback mechanism that has been put in place for this purpose in order to increase the trust of the people in the state. This open and tolerant dialogue with the peoples is perceived by the authorities as an effective mechanism to resolve problems and to ensure social justice. Third, within the framework of the state program, there are measures aimed at optimizing interaction between the state bodies and the citizens in order to resolve the most severe economic problems of the citizens. There is a genuine sense of accountability of all ministers, the Ministry of Home Affairs, the prosecution, the various line ministries. Fourth, there is implementation of many projects to develop high technology as a way of creating new places of work. There is a lot of investment in agriculture. We are seeking to develop our production for export, which can increase the revenues of farmers. The general principle is that if the people are rich, then the state will also be rich. So special conditions are being made available for the development of entrepreneurship and especially small businesses. In March of this year, a program of general measures to ensure full employment of the population was adopted. This includes a whole series of measures to amend the labor code and other legislation, and also to implement programs that will create places of work that will ensure jobs for graduates of professional secondary schools and universities. As a sixth point, we want to make sure that there is enough purchasing power within the society to make sure that everyone has access to safe and healthy products. A state committee has been set up for the control of prices of particularly sensitive products that everyone purchases in order to make sure that there is no manipulation of prices on the domestic market. And in areas like social security, healthcare, providing natural gas, drinking water, electricity, and other communal services to the peoples. On the 12th of September, the President signed a package of new measures for particularly vulnerable groups within the society, ensuring them with social support in 2017 and 2018. Families that are disadvantaged, that want to gain access to new forms of employment or develop their own small businesses, will be given access to microcredits through commercial banks, but on privileged conditions, on advantageous conditions. As for education, 11 years of general education is now obligatory for all. New universities are being opened, new art centers. The system of preschool education is being resolved. In September of this year, the President signed a package of measures to improve the quality and quantity of preschool education available in the city of Tashkent and various other regional centers. New preschools have been opened on the basis of a public-private partnership system. And the work of religious organizations is also being stimulated, similarly for cultural and art groups. The President also signed a decision to implement a whole series of measures to stimulate the production and the printing of books. Specific measures have been adopted to promote reading. The defense of human rights will always be at the very heart of our further democratic reform efforts. Thank you for your attention. And the moderator thanks Uzbekistan for sharing those good practices.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to put some security perspective in our discussion. We appreciate that economic, social, and cultural rights are among specifically selected topics of this year's meeting. Protection of these rights is one of the key pillars for ensuring sustainable development. We believe that HDIM is the right platform to address challenges in this area from security perspective and thus contribute to the activities of other international organizations, first and foremost the UN, in reaching sustainable development goals. Armenia attaches importance to protection of inalienable economic, social, and cultural rights. We advocate international regional cooperation in this regard, which could raise the level of understanding, confidence, and trust between our societies. Armenia has overcome hardships of the first years of independence and is now itself contributing to protection of economic and social rights. We are participating in providing humanitarian assistance to Syria. Armenia is hosting more than 20,000 refugees from that country and Iraq, and ensuring their economic and social rights is a priority for our authorities. Regrettably, in the OSCE area, some participating states continue to violate economic and social rights of people as means to reach their political objectives. In this context, we would like to recall that the OSCE participating states have committed to refrain from acts of political, economic, and other coercion against other participating states in Helsinki Final Act. Turkey is pursuing its policy of illegal land blockade of my country, which lasts for already a quarter of a century. Such a policy is aimed at undermining social and economic development of Armenia and isolating Armenia from international economic cooperation. We would like to draw the attention of the audience also to the need of ensuring social and economic rights of people residing in conflict areas, which is of utmost relevance for our security organization. Realization of the individual and collective human rights and fundamental freedoms, including economic and social rights, must not be dependent on the status of territory where people live, a concept which is well embedded in all international instruments, including Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The international instruments such as the UN Covenant on Political and Civil Rights and the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights empower people to pursue their economic and cultural development by the virtue of the right to self-determination. The UN Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights in its Article 1.2 establishes that all peoples may for their own ends freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation, based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. End of quotation. And in the end, we would like to make a recommendation to the OSCE and its institutions to be involved in addressing the violation of economic, social and cultural rights of people residing in conflict areas and to elaborate measures for protection of these rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Delegation from Armenia. Now I'd like to give the floor to the political movement Group 24, followed by Institute for Reporters' Freedom and Safety.
Спасибо, уважаемый модератор.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Safar Fazliuddin, I'm a representative of the political movement Group 24, young people of Tajikistan. The rights that we are talking about ensure a decent life for citizens, and that is the consequence of specially adopted laws which concretize rights of citizens. The problem of social fairness and equality is linked to the issue of equality, and that is affected by dictatorial regimes. Fairness is often considered as a consequence of a certain level of equality, and it's necessary to note that in the process of education, the stability of society can be strengthened, creating the foundation for individual social mobility, facilitating the strength of and stability of the society as a whole. When we're talking about these rights, we have to recognize that social inequality is a result of the policy of Rakhmonova. The society in recent years have suffered from inequality, the destruction of the economic conditions, which have led to a worsening situation where inequality is seen as a social norm, something that is broadly accepted. The ruling class is dependent upon links to the president, and therefore the entrance into the ruling class is limited, which means that the poorer classes are condemned to their unequal position in poverty. It's necessary to recognize the subculture of poverty which has arisen, and this inequality can be a cause of conflict. These phenomena need to be closely seen as interlinked, inequality and poverty. We need to see the mutual effects. The problem of social inequality has its historic roots in specific national situations, the way that individual countries have developed, and modern-day Tajikistan is an example of this. in order to ensure that rights are available for people to enjoy, democratic reforms are necessary. Thank you very much.
Спасибо. We still have 4 speakers on the speakers list, and I would like to ask if any delegation would like to exercise the right to reply. If so, please do sign up on the speakers list. Now I would like to give a floor to Institute for Reporters' Freedom and Safety, followed by delegation of Moldova.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, moderator, for giving me the floor. In Azerbaijan, the problem of economic, social, and cultural rights is very acute. Violation of these rights is the main source of enrichment of the authoritarian powers that be. Now, one of the people who has reported on this, a blogger who has written hundreds of reports about civil servants who are responsible for protecting the rights of refugees, of vulnerable groups in the society, children, the disabled, and so on, ended up enriching themselves and buying luxurious cars and multi-million-dollar villas, and he's ended up in prison. Each of his reports on his blog was reacted to by many individuals through YouTube, through Instagram, and this was resulted in the government calling for the parliament almost every month to do away with someone who's so critical. And of course, he is now unable to continue. So how can you protect economic, social, and cultural rights in a country like Azerbaijan when 68% of the economy, of the GDP, is in the shadow economy? And it is a secret for no one that the basis for this is the violation of economic, social, and cultural rights of individual citizens. Oligarchs have plantations where women and children who not only have no economic, social, and cultural rights, I mean, they don't even have employment contracts, and they work for kopecks. So the recent years in Azerbaijan have seen a violation of these rights, resulting in a sharp increase in the number of suicides because people simply aren't self-sufficient. And here I would like to say a few words about the role of trade unions, which are governed by the law on association, and they have fallen almost entirely under the control of the authorities. The leader of the Confederation of Trade Unions of Azerbaijan, Satar Mekhalev, is now one of the most powerful and the richest oligarchs in the country. He's supposed to protect the rights of workers, and yet he's turned into a representative of the ruling elite. He's a member of parliament, and he's an oligarch. He's extremely wealthy. And there have been a number of suicides by the disabled who have burned themselves, and this individual hasn't even had the decency to resign from his position. Teachers are dismissed simply because they refuse to participate in actions organized by the government. There's a couple of teachers who were dismissed from their positions, and the trade union of teachers did not do anything to protect them. Only the trade union of teachers in the United States stepped forward and made some critical statements. In Azerbaijan, after in the introduction of a more severe law on organizations and associations, more than 100 groups have had to close down, not just ones like ours, which criticize the authorities for violations of human rights. I'm talking about groups that worked to protect the rights of women, of children, that promoted environmental programs, that protected the rights of the disabled. Azerbaijan has lost its civil society, and discrimination against the civil society is something that is expressed personally by the President Aliyev, who recently said in an interview that I've decided to do away once and for all with civil society by cutting off their access to funds from abroad. And so we would call on OSCE participating states to put pressure on Azerbaijan and to appeal to countries like Azerbaijan to respect economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as the fundamental rights we've talked about earlier, which are in the most deplorable condition in Azerbaijan within the OSCE region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The principles of non-discrimination, universality, and equality of rights are essential and represent the pillar of the Moldovan human rights protection system guaranteed by the Constitution of the Republic of Moldova. Whenever disagreements appear between conventions and treaties ratified by the Republic of Moldova and its national law, priority is given to international provisions. According to provision of Article 10 of the law number 121 of 25 May 2012 on ensuring equality, the Council on the Prevention and Elimination of Discrimination and Ensuring Equality, Equality Council, was established in 2013, which currently operates according to the regulation approved by the law number 298 of 21st December 2012. Following the entry into force on 1st of January 2013 of the law on ensuring equality, the Equality Council was set up as the main national non-discrimination mechanism. The activity of the Council as an autonomous, unbiased, and independent public authority has begun in October 2013, when the selection procedure and approval of its members by the Parliament were finished. The Council members are appointed by the Parliament of Moldova for a 5-year term. 3 of the members who were appointed by the Parliament are the representatives of the civil society with an extensive experience in the field of human rights. The Equality Council was created as a collegial body having the status of a legal person of public law, aiming at ensuring the protection against discrimination and equality of all persons who consider themselves victims of discrimination. The activity of the Council is based on impartiality and independence principles. It formulates recommendations and adopts decisions on immediate reinstatement of victims of discrimination in their rights. The law number 121 on ensuring equality establishes a general legal framework concerning the prevention and fighting against discrimination and ensures equal political, economic, social, cultural rights, as well entitles every person without distinct to race, color, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, sex, age, limited abilities, political view, or any other status. According to Article 3 of the above-mentioned law, subject to anti-discrimination policies are physical and legal persons of public and private sector. The list of non-discrimination criteria, according to the law, is rather indicative than limitative, which allows to cover all grounds for discrimination. In 2014, the Council was invested with powers of an investigating agent for certain categories of contraventions. The procedure to examine complaints on the rectification of civil status acts as a result of sex change was stipulated as judiciary practice in the recommendation number 16 issued by the Supreme Court of Justice in November 2012. On 10th of December 2015, the Council was awarded the United Nations Human Rights Prize for its activity in combating discrimination and ensuring equality. The other important initiative by public politics adapted for the Republic of Moldova is the new national strategy of communication for preventing and eliminating discrimination and ensuring equality. The strategy is addressed to international organization community, sponsors, state institution, activists, and other interested, which are involved in preventing discrimination and ensuring equality. The strategy was publicly presented on 16th July 2017 in Chisinau. The work of the Equality Council has also been improved by putting in place at the end of 2016 a management information system of the Council, case management software, which is expected to significantly increase the efficiency of the organization in processing, monitoring, and managing complaints it receives and processes. The automated management information system is serving as an effective working tool for organizing and conducting the processes of reception, processing, and resolution for each particular petition addressed. The new system is expected to enhance Equality Council's institutional capacity, speed up the delivery of decisions, contribute to the production of better data on the activity of the Council, and implicitly generate better evidence for the improvement of policies within human rights and equality domains. According to the survey carried out in 2015 by the Council in cooperation with the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights under the Supporting National Human Rights Institution as per international treaty bodies and UPR recommendation project, discrimination is not perceived as one of the most pressing challenges of the society. Only 3% of the respondents included it among the top problems that should be addressed without delay. During 2015-2017, the Council strengthened its relationship with a non-governmental organization such as Institute for Public Policy from the Republic of Moldova and Promolex Association. The Council enhanced significantly its institutional capacity during the reporting period by participating in training activities and study visits. The first report of the Equality Council was presented in May 2014 within the Parliamentary Committee for Human Rights and Ethnic Relations. On the website egalitate.md, there is a new service, Amicus Curiae, through which individual specialized non-governmental organizations or advocacy groups may provide information about discrimination issues examined by the Council. In addition, electronic complaints may be sent to the Council via the website. The victim or any other interested person as complainant may describe the discrimination issues by filling in an online form. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. I would like to give the floor now to Human Rights Education Center, followed by Chernivtsi Regional NGO Human Rights.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Уважаемые
respected participants, moderator. Economic social rights are necessary in the context of increasing inequality. It's a very topical issue. For these rights to be implemented, they have to be based on something, some kind of instruments of communication. So the best communication tool, of course, is language. We've heard mention of the rights of national minorities and the role of language. The Tsarist General Maravio said everything that has come into the Russian language is dependent upon our tradition, paraphrasing. And recently, Putin said that Donbass would benefit from the protection of the Russian language. We have, since 2002, talked about the problem of Belarusians in Belarus. The situation is a peculiar one. Belarusians have become a genuine national ethnic minority, and all of their rights are being violated by a dictatorship imposed from Moscow, Alexander Lukashenko. The thing that concerns us, and the thing which unfortunately we haven't seen over the last 15 years is that not a single European country has really looked at the facts in Belarus head on. The problem of the national minorities in Belarus is illustrated by what's happening in the town of Grodnya, where there is a Polish school, but there isn't a Belarusian school. All of the local schools teach in the Russian language. There are village schools where Belarusian is used, but it's very unusual. Last year, Lukashenko said that a national Belarusian university would be established teaching in Belarusian, but that hasn't happened yet. Secondly, dictator Lukashenko has talked about equality, social rights of citizens, and decent pay. But he's dropped this from his speech over the last 2 years, not talking about decent pay, but rather talking about peace amongst citizens. What's particularly interesting in terms of these social issues is that Alexander Lukashenko, in his 23 years of rulership, has led us practically to an economic disaster. And one of the ways that he's tried to overcome the situation is by taxing unemployment. Taxing unemployment, can you imagine? Thousands of people who do not work in Belarus are subject to a levy. They obviously don't want to register at the local job center because there's no hope of finding work, and the wages that they could get would be far below what they need to survive. So many of them seek work elsewhere. There aren't independent trade unions. They're repressed. Human rights defenders are repressed as well. We've talked about this already. So the Belarusian ethnic minority do not have economic, social, or cultural rights. Recent figures show that entrepreneurs over the last 2 years have halved in their number. Quite simply, the dictator is not letting them work. Thank you very much.
I'd like to give the floor to Chernivtsi Regional NGO Human Rights, followed by the last speaker on our list, delegation of Belarus.
Good morning to all. I'm very pleased that I've managed, nevertheless, to participate in this meeting, because since the 3rd of August, I've been applying for a biometric passport that was supposed to be ready in 3 weeks, and is not yet the case. My time in Warsaw is very limited. I just managed to get in. I have to cross the border again. But insofar as the protection of economic, social, and cultural rights in Ukraine, it's very interesting to hear people from the outside saying, there's a lot of reforms. I mean, this reminds me of the old story where the Jew comes to the rabbi and says, my chickens are dying, and he tells them to give them some corn. The second day they're still dying. The third day, did it work? Yes, it worked. Now they've all died, and I no longer have a problem. So the reforms are like these dying chickens. We have supposed reforms, but organizations representing minorities such as the disabled, and 8 million and these organizations are being closed down. There are 8 million people living on pensions. My pension, for instance, amounts to 40-odd euros per month. And our war statistics are also flabbergasting. We have the supposed anti-terrorist operation in which among the thousands of people who have died, there are only a handful who are soldiers, others are civilians. So I think that it's like other anti-terrorist operations elsewhere, where there were 136 people who died in an anti-terrorist operation. So it would seem that the government wants there to be fewer and fewer people in Ukraine. Another anecdote is that in some countries there are oligarchs. In our country, there are oligarchs who have a country. It's the other way around. I mean, it's really frightening to talk about all of this. And what is really amazing is that all of this is being put in place with the help of outside specialists. I mean, there was this one expert who came in for a few months and managed to earn 1.5 million euros. It just seems to me that Ukraine has become a money laundering machine. I mean, in some countries of Europe, it's just impossible to steal 1.5 million euros, but in my country, it is possible. So any talk about economic, social, and cultural rights in Ukraine really means to give the people as little as possible, and I think it really amounts to a state-organized genocide. The representatives of our organizations, as you will have seen over the years that I've been coming here, a lot of us have simply died off, and there is an overall sense of national shame. But in our country, the oligarchs have no shame. They are stealing massive amounts of money at the cost of impoverishment and of the people and corruption. These new reforms, for instance, the school reform, where school buses of the Bogdan company will earn lots of money on moving pupils around, and of course you get no prize for guessing to whom the Bogdan company belongs. Thank you for your attention.
Our least delegation of Belarus, and then I would like to recognize that so far we have 6 delegations who asked to exercise the right to reply. So Belarus, the floor is yours.
Большое спасибо. Thank you very much, moderator. Allow us also to thank the introducers for the very interesting presentation. In the OSCE, there is a traditional priority given to questions relating to the first and third dimensions of security. The overlap between the second and third dimension is what we're looking at today, and these issues relating to human rights, economic, social, and cultural rights have often taken a back seat. Issues such as corruption, social inequality, mass poverty, unemployment are a serious threat to national security and the well-being of citizens, especially in the economic crisis. As has been fairly noted by our rapporteur, the economic, social, and cultural rights are part of all of the fundamental documents of our organization, from the Helsinki Final Act to the Maastricht strategy document on the ecological dimension, and the how the document on countering or on adopting a strategy from 2003. So the question of how to protect these rights and develop freedom is a part of our organization. I think the aspect of the parliamentary dimension is very important in promoting these rights. And once again, I would like to draw your attention to the resolution which in 2014 was adopted at the initiative of the Belarusian delegation at the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. The document contained a call on participating states to take specific measures to improve things in the social and economic dimension and ensure these rights and develop together within their international organizations work in this area. We believe that the contribution of the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE and the Parliament dimension in general, including the Committee on the Science, Technology and the Environment, can make a contribution. So we would further call for cooperation amongst the OSCE institutions, ODIHR, the Parliamentary Assembly, and other parts of the executive structure of the organization to participate with participating states to protect economic, social, and cultural rights in the region of our organization. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо делегации Беларуси. To give floor to delegations who would like to exercise right to reply. We will allocate generous 2 minutes. And then, with your permission, I would like to give a floor to our introducer for concluding remarks, observations. The first on our list is delegation of Georgia, which will be followed by delegation of Italy.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and I would like to make a few remarks of a rather general character. First, we entirely reject the continued baseless and rather absurd allegations voiced by the representatives of the two NGOs from Georgia's currently occupied Skin Valley region. Second, a claim that there is no Ossetian language news available in Georgia is an outright lie. There is such an opportunity, and in fact, the Georgian public broadcaster offers daily news programs both in Abkhaz and Ossetian languages at 11 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. respectively. As regards opportunities for education, in line with the state strategy on integration and civic equality of Georgia, elaborated with the assistance and active engagement of the OSCE's Office of the High Commissioner on National Minorities, in 2016, Ossetian language was taught in the elementary and high schools of Wareli and Lagodehi municipalities throughout 1st to 9th and the 1st to 12th grades respectively. In addition, ethnic minorities, including ethnic Ossetians, are offered special educational program 1+4, which gives opportunity to the young people to pass exams in their native language, then undertake intensive Georgian language course and continue their university studies. On another note, I would like to take this opportunity and inform the distinguished representatives of these NGOs that the government of Georgia has just recently translated the information on EU visa-free travel opportunities on minority languages, including Ossetian. Mr. Moderator, frankly speaking, we're not surprised at all by such claims and continued attempts to undermine Georgia's territorial integrity and sovereignty within its internationally recognized borders. We do, in fact, realize where such claims come from and which country uses such instruments, as it has been rather obvious and self-evident throughout these sessions, and we strongly reject them. Therefore, we would like to call upon the Russian Federation to stop using important forums like this for the purpose of misleading the participants of this important conference and essentially legitimizing its persisting illegal and destabilizing policies against its neighbors. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. I would like to give a floor now to delegation of Italy, followed by delegation of Ukraine.
Grazie, signor moderatore.
Thank you, moderator. I would like to take advantage of my right of reply in order to respond to what was said by the Russian Federation. I'm delighted to be able to confirm to you that there is this commitment of the future Italian chairmanship in office to promote economic, social, and cultural rights. And we do recognize the indivisibility of human rights, those three we're talking about today, vis-a-vis also civil and political rights. And we believe that support for the one also means support for the other. Italy reiterates its intention to work to promote economic, social, and cultural rights, and this within the framework of a rule of law that would also support civil and political rights. Thank you for your attention.
To give the floor now to delegation of Ukraine, followed by delegation of United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As the name of my country was mentioned by World Russian People's Council in the concept of so-called Russian world, I would like to respond in Russian. Продвижение
The movement that has been mentioned is not compatible with the Russian state as a whole, but with the broader context. We've seen the claim that this project was something that involved the conflict in Donbass being prompted from outside. So there is a basis to say that the idea of a Russian, the world view, doesn't bring peace, but brings death, that many people have seen their economic and social rights violated in buying into this idea. So instead of some kind of imperial idea, we'd call on the Russian Federation and all organizations in this country to focus on applying the fundamental principles of the SCE: sovereignty, territorial integrity, non-violability of borders. This is something which is key. With regard to education, we have provided sufficient information on this at previous sessions of this meeting. Thank you very much.
Spasiba. I would like to give the floor now to the delegation of United States of America, followed by delegation of UK. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Moderator. With respect to the comments of the two NGOs, the United States fully supports the territorial integrity of Georgia and its sovereignty within its internationally recognized borders. Our position on Abkhazia and South Ossetia is clear and consistent. These regions are integral parts of Georgia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I would like to give the floor now to United Kingdom, followed by delegation of France.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll be brief. We reaffirm our full support for Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. We underline the need for a peaceful resolution over the conflict in Georgia based on full respect of the UN Charter, the Helsinki Final Act, and the fundamental norms and principles of international law. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. I would like to give the floor to the delegation of France, followed by Canada.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. France reiterates its resolute position, which is also the position of the EU, namely full support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Georgia within its internationally recognized borders. Furthermore, in response to the Russian Federation, I would like to reiterate the message to be found in the declaration of the EU, which was apparently misheard on the interdependent nature of civil and political rights on the one hand and economic, social, and cultural on the other. Thank you for your attention.
Followed by Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This will be repeating what many have just said. Canada would like to reaffirm its support for Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its international recognized borders, and would state clearly that we do not recognize the so-called Republic of South Ossetia, as was mentioned by one speaker this morning. Also, regarding the concern expressed by the Russian Federation, and they cited Canada, regarding the balance of economic, social, and cultural rights with civil and political rights. I would echo the comments from my distinguished UK colleague that she made in her statement on behalf of the EU, when she rightly stated that we cannot separate civil and political rights from economic, social, and cultural rights. Canada is committed to addressing all forms of inequality and discrimination, and we concur that we must consider human rights in the whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Canada. I would like to give the floor now to Russian Federation.
Thank you very much. I would like to take the opportunity to use the right to reply to respond to comments made by Georgia and other delegations. We'd like to note that we call on everybody to recognize the current real situation, the existence of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and we would encourage the Georgian delegation to promote dialogue with these two independent states. With regard to the Ukraine intervention, we believe that insinuations such as this relating to the Russian Russian language should be left aside in favor of promoting the rights of national minorities in the country and ensuring the use of the Russian language and protecting its meaning for that country in the world. Thank you.
Any more delegations who would like to exercise their right to reply? And with your kind permission, I would like to give the floor back to our introducer for her concluding remarks. Professor Machińska, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for all your contributions, so interesting contributions, which shows that the issue of economic, social, and cultural rights is a very important challenge for all of us. It's a very important challenge which we face at the beginning of 21st century. These rights cannot be separated from civil and political rights. These rights are interdependent and interrelated. The international legal instruments securing economic social rights, as I said, cannot be separated. And what is very important for the effectiveness of the realization of these rights are the monitoring systems. Well, there are different monitoring systems, and I want to pay your attention to the problem of effectiveness of the monitoring systems. Definitely, maybe in the future, this issue should be deeply discussed. We face a lot of violation as far as the economic social rights. Well, there are many grounds of these violations. Many speakers made reference to the discrimination issue. Discriminations which, well, this is the issue existing not only in law, but very often, of course, in practice. Discrimination against many groups, national minorities, well, women, children, people with disabilities. And nowadays we are a witness of a very important phenomenon, very negative situation when we face such a deep discrimination against migrants. Lack of proper anti-discrimination framework could be, well, one of the main obstacles to full realization of these rights. Well, the issue of the protection of securing economic and social rights, it's not only the issue which should be addressed to the to participating states. It is an issue which should be addressed to all of us. There are a huge space for the activity of different actors, of non-governmental organizations, and as we notice already, especially on the labor market, business, which should play such an important role. So there are many questions which are still open, and we should discuss maybe in the future how to increase the effectiveness of international treaties. Well, we have so many legal standards coming from UN treaties, for regional instruments, from so many OEC documents. And what's about the acceptance of these standards? Acceptance not in a verbal way, but acceptance in practice. How we communicate these standards to many people, to society. Well, the communication of social economic rights, it's a very important challenge for all of us. So what seems to me extremely important, it's how to improve practical use of international legal obligation and how the members, participating states, will make use in in everyday practice at the national level with these standards. So the main responsibility for a proper realization of economic social rights is the other C of should be, of course, the participating states. But behind the participating states are a lot of actors, many actors, which should be also responsible. And, they should exert the pressure on the participating state to act in a proper way. Well, we should also notice that economic and social rights is a problem of democracy. Lack of these rights means lack of democratic institutions, lack of proper behavior, lack of rule of law and human rights. And that's why I think that we should stress again that economic and social and cultural rights cannot be neglected rights. These are rights of primary importance. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Mahinska. You mentioned that we should continue with some of those discussions in the future, and the future is really just behind the corner, because the next session, working session 315, will take some of those important issues into consideration. We will continue with this topic in the afternoon session. But first of all, let me thank all the speakers, all the participants, and our introducer for a fantastic discussion which we had this morning. I would like to also thank interpreters. I would like to remind the participants that for the next session, the speakers list will be open 1 hour before the session, so you please do register yourself as a speaker for the next session. We will close the list when the limit will reach a limit of 50 speakers. I would also like to kindly invite you to a number of very interesting side events which will take place during the lunchtime. And once again, thank you very much for your active participation. Thank you.